ラクアを目指して旅をなされた。ギベオン様はルシアスを無二の仲間と信じました。お二人は共にポケモンと人間の世界を豊かにする夢を抱いておられたのです。ですがラクアでお二人はラクリウムをめぐり対立された。
What's going on, Pokemon fans? What an absolute fantastic episode. Episode 83 was this week of Pokemon Horizons. And as I was jumping into, this video, I was like, how can I really state this? And I think where I landed on was Pokemon Horizons, Pokemon in general, the medium, is always doing this balance of making sure that it is not overloading what its core audience is. And don't get it twisted. The core audience of this show is children somewhere between the ages of like 6 and 15. And that's going to be like the core audience. At least that's going to be the demographic that Pokemon's trying to go for. And because they have a kind of like a wide range of children's mentality, is they can only spend so much time getting down to the dirty, the nitty-gritty, and the emotional, right? Like, I think this episode did a good job of conveying Amethio and Gibeon and their history, but not overloading us and not making it too sentimental as well. And even the moment where they're talking about Ametheo's mother's death, they definitely did mention it, but they didn't spend too much time in it, nor did they spend too much time in Ametheo's kind of remorse for it. They just kind of touched on it and then kind of kept it moving. And in that moment, I was like, man, that was like a really emotional thing. Like they should have, done X, Y, Z. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, the show is for children. And if I had my kids watching it, you know what I mean? Which they unfortunately haven't taken too well to Pokemon Horizons. They've only watched like the initial first like batch of episodes, like 15 or so. But like if they were to watch it, more, I'd be like, okay, well, how deep would I want them to go into losing a parent? And like, well, I would want them to keep it pretty surface level because I don't want to make my kids over emotional because they can get over emotional because, their little brains will start to think about, like what if something like that were to happen? And you don't want to do that. You don't want to go too far into that. So I was like, okay, I think they struck a perfect balance here. And the episode fell short, which is a good thing. I think they covered a lot of ground. I think they covered Amethio pretty heavily, and I think finding out that, his mother passed away and that Humbert is his name, the butler, kind of took up the parental duties of, filling in the gap of two parents, even though Ametheo's father's still around running the Exceed company. He took up both things because Amethio was basically being raised by his mother and father was out doing business type thing, basically being a POS, right? Like being a non-existent father. Like he's father in thy name only, essentially. And I love that it kind of went through kind of how he was raised and how, he had his goals in mind. And I like how he got ran through the Explorers version of Gibeon. And how his twisted mentality is kind of, he's kind of made saintly in a way of, they don't really see it as him trying just to elongate his own lifespan and trying to monopolize a thing for himself. They see it as him trying to make the world better and the world of Pokemon and people better, which is not the case at all. But I like how they spin it in their own narrative, very, very politician-like. And based on that, based on that, Amethio decided that he's going to protect his grandfather from Spinel because Spinel, from his point of view, unless proven otherwise, is going to monopolize Requiem for himself, which totally makes sense, right? Like if you were to find out about something like that, and you're a little, it makes sense that he would also think about twisting that for himself and like getting one over on this Gibeon dude. We got to find out more about Zygarde and the fact that Humbert is guarding one of Zygarde's cells, which I think is really, really cool. And we got to find out that the reason that Zygarde is in his dog form is because a lot of his cells during the battle where Gibeon, fell off a cliff and stuff, he lost some of his cells there. So that was pretty cool as well, too, to kind of find out, like, here's why Zygarde is currently stuck in its non-complete form. So I thought that was cool, too. Next episode is called The Place Where Heaven and Earth Meet. Obviously, we're going to try and take to Laqua, and we're going to be able to, get one step closer there as the group, they ascend to Laqua. Next episode, looks like we're going to meet some indigenous people who probably live surrounding that area, which I think is pretty cool as well. And let me think what else happened in this episode. So that, we kind of set up the Amethio stuff, which I thought was pretty cool. Not a lot happened with Liko and her group because this episode is really just focused around Amethio. He found Spinel's plans. And yeah, I mean, that was really it. It was all Amethio and his past and Gibeon and his past and their future and their point of view. So yeah, I'll leave it pretty easy. I think this episode was a good episode. I think let's call it a 7.5 out of 10 episode. Depending how you look at it, it could be a little bit boring. But it was information packed with history and point of views and Amethio's goals, and that he wasn't surprised by Liko being Lucius's descendant, and yeah, everything else. So I think this was a good episode. But don't get it twisted. It definitely only covered one side, and then now we're moving on to the next thing, was actually getting to Laqua. So now we have a little bit more power, a little bit more context, a little bit more information as we move forward into whatever Amethio decides once he comes across Spinel and that group and Liko and her group. Let's see how he's going to kind of fit in and what he's going to decide and how he's going to protect his grandfather in his own way. All right, my friends. All right, trainers. I'll see you guys next week for episode number 84. Yeah, can't wait. Peace out, my friends.